Thank you. These are really, really hard thoughts to have. They're hard to have them. They're hard to hold them, and they're difficult to share. And you have just a huge capacity for love. I know this about you already, and really appreciate you being open about your feelings, because when we see our leaders, when we see our heroes, when we see our people that we look up to, talking about maybe thoughts that we might quietly have, but we're not willing to verbalize. When we see someone willing to verbalize and say, hey, I needed some help, and I reached out and I asked for that help, and it put me back on a more steady path so that I can go realize, my potential, my human potential. So,
And I mean, I just want to say, like, and I didn't do the best job with this growing up. And to be completely honest, I probably still don't do the best job of it because, again, as a little person and someone who, you know, thinks they should have it all together, and then going to, another, I guess, societal and cultural viewpoint as a man as well. It also goes back to like my childhood. Like, as a man, we've been taught not to express our feelings, not be vulnerable, not, put our hand up and say, hey, I'm really hurting, I'm really feeling something. um and we've been taught to silence that. We've been taught not to speak up. We've been taught that we need to hold it all in, and we need to create this wall of armor and protection around us because, people won't care. And I think that's one of the biggest things where, working with all these different organizations and programs, that I'm really trying to help change that narrative and even change the narrative in my own mind, because there's still things that unfortunately my mind still tells me, like, don't talk about that, don't share that, don't, be completely transparent about that because no one will care. And that's unfortunately a lie that, we tell ourselves, and it's a lie that culture and society for so long has convinced us to believe as well. So it's just about, changing the narrative and changing all these lies that society and culture has taught us as, human beings, and from, my perspective personally, as what a man traditionally might look like according to society and culture. Because I'm not your typical masculine man. I am, growing up, have always been more in touch with my feelings, and I have been more, open about sharing, what's inside my heart rather than what's, the external validation. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing that there were some influences on your early life. Can we talk about family?
Mm.
Let's talk about how it was growing up in society, in your neighborhood, and in your own family dynamic. You've mentioned your sister as being a really powerful force in your life. So if you're open to sharing that, I think, the family caregiving and the family role is really important in our world.
Mm. Yeah, so growing up, I mean, I, was very different. And I think it just changed the dynamic in my family to, understand that life wouldn't always look normal, or quote unquote normal, to other families. And, my family were very supportive, and they were willing to make changes and adjustments around having to live with someone with a different ability and someone who was short statured. And not to say that it was easy for them, because I can't imagine, from my parents' perspective, I always try to put myself in their shoes and their headspace, what it would have been like to find out that you're having a child with such unique, different abilities, and that will be challenged, throughout their entire life. And I know that they're very proud of me. I know that they're very happy for what I'm doing. But growing up, it was they did the best that they could. They just had to try and support me emotionally. It was more on the emotional side because physically, what can you do physically? I mean, in my house, obviously they made adjustments, like they changed, where they put stuff, how things were arranged, and I had step stools and all that stuff. But on the emotional side, I think one of the things is they were just there for me, and I can't say that they always understood me, and I can't necessarily say that they always understand me still to this day. And I think that's one of the things that I still struggle a little bit with, even though obviously I'm now 31, going into 32 next year, that they've obviously learned to understand um, more of where I come from on an emotional level, because obviously now I'm able to actually verbalize it and express it so much better. And I've had a lot more time to be able to live with and understand my own emotional connection and identity and, all those feelings. But when I was younger, I couldn't verbalize that. I didn't know what was happening, in my mind, in my heart. I didn't know how to communicate, these things. And so they didn't really know how to help me either. But I think one of the most important things, I think, was our faith. I grew up Christian. My family was Christian. And so being taught that our value is in God and that we're made in His image, I think it became a very firm foundation. Um, Again, not to say that I didn't have a ton of questions, a ton of doubts, and everything. And I go into that in my book, which is what one of the titles of the chapters that I'm writing right now is called "Not a Mistake." And this was a belief and a mindset that I had to challenge growing up. And that in the church and in the Christian faith, that we're taught that God is perfect and that He never makes a mistake. And that was a really hard notion and concept for me to believe when I saw all around me that everyone was, again, quote unquote, normal. And I wasn't. I was shorter than the rest. I was not. I had all these challenges. I had all these medical issues, and a lot going on. That I wondered, did God make a mistake? And that's something is a very profound thought to have when you're, only like 5, 6 years old. It's a very profound thought to have, and it's a very heavy thought to have, and it's a very heavy feeling to have to live with growing up, and that's what led me into all of my questioning of my self-worth and my value. And I want to be a husband, I want to be a father, and I still wrestle with those thoughts and those questions today because it's, again, going back to culture and society. I'm not your typical average male, and I'm 4'2", and that can be very difficult for the relationship dynamic. Uh, but then going back to something my sister has always said is that growing up with me in the house has really changed her perspective on how she sees the world. And I think that's something that we need to try and educate society on and culture on and the world as a whole on, because a lot of families and a lot of people, they don't grow up around people with different abilities, so they don't ever really get to experience life, and the perspective of what someone with a different ability goes through and the challenges they face. And so, unfortunately, because of that, there was a lot of ignorance. There was a lot of demeaning. There was a lot of thinking that they don't have as much equal value as those that don't have different abilities. And from, that perspective, when I say different, don't have different abilities, not to say that, they don't have anything unique or special about
Of
them,
course, of
because
course.
everyone does,
Yeah.
but they don't have these specific different ability challenges where, they might have short stature, they might have Down syndrome, they might have a wheelchair, all these types of things. But, just to be able to help them realize that, everyone should be treated equal on a human innate value perspective. That just because you struggle with, a different ability of that type doesn't mean that you're not inherently valued as a human being.
Oh, couldn't agree more. And this conversation is taking me back to many of my younger memories. I know I've talked to you about growing up in a family. I was the youngest of five children, and three of my four older brothers were born with a rare genetic disease called Hunter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And Hunter causes individuals to be short of stature and to gain the ability to walk and talk, and then lose that ability to walk and talk. So at a very young age, um, I witnessed sort of firsthand the struggles that they were having, and then also just the backdrop. I was kind of like the watcher, the backdrop of how people would interact with my brothers. And eventually they passed at 12, 18, and 19 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always had um, this understanding that life is a gift, and that I got to live, and that, that this is not a dress rehearsal, that we are here, on the planet for a very short period of time, and that we all have something to contribute. We all have a perspective to share. And even as we look at someone across the room or across the table and think, oh, they've got it all sorted out, we sort of know from the COVID experience, it was the great universal global humbling, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are all very vulnerable as human beings, and that we're stronger together, we're stronger with our faith, and we're stronger, leading with love instead of judgment. So you brought a lot of those themes up. Anything come up for you as we're talking about it?
No, I mean, just going back to like what you're saying, that COVID, it was the great equalizer, because no matter who you are, no matter who you were, who you are, like, no, we were all shut inside. We were all having to distance. We all had to wrestle with, what do we do from this point on? The virus didn't care who you were, didn't care your skin color, didn't care your nationality, didn't care whether had physical challenges, mental challenges, didn't care. It didn't care. It just, like, I mean, from a weirdly darker perspective, it humbled us in being like, I don't care. You're just a human being. You're just something that it's going to attack. And so I think, weirdly, at that time in the world, we really, I'd say 90% of us came together to understand that we were in the same boat.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there were still people that had wanted to create chaos and all that kind of stuff, and we always will, even out of the greatest tragedies and the best things to come out of these things. There's always going to be people that are going to take advantage and not see it from our perspective. But COVID was a great equalizer in the sense that we hopefully had one enemy to fight.
Yeah.
Um, and 90% of us did, realize that it was like humanity against the virus. And again, I think we're kind of there again. There are a few moments in history that these kind of things come up. I think we're at that tipping point with AI again. We see it a lot. As technology, I mean, technology is incredible. We can use it for great good. But then there's also on the flip side, you can use it for great evil. And I
Mhm.
think when we're talking about humanity, is like, how do we keep our humanity and utilize this kind of technology to help us rather than hinder us, or to remove our humanity from us? And I think we're at that point where we need to realize, like, how do we work with AI in a good way and not let it take away our humanity, which as an actor, is I'm seeing a lot, because I don't know if you've heard, but obviously they've created one of the first synthetic AI actresses, and it's been an absolute uproar in the acting industry and community. So I see that happening, and there's just, in all other industries, there's a lot of AI being used not in the best way to help us move forward. So it's something we need to come together and try and discuss and think about how we actually use that type of technology, because it's very powerful. But it can be used for good or it can be used for evil.
Yes, yes. And we're seeing advancements. We were talking about family life, and then we were talking about COVID and the impact of that. And the other thing that we were witnessing during COVID was the impact on healthcare, on the healthcare system and the healthcare providers and those that have, chosen to have a field, a commitment in with their Hippocratic oath, and others to, do no harm and do the best that they can to bring health and healing. And one of the big things that we talk about at Raregivers is the importance of emotional health in addition to physical health, including for healthcare providers. There are carers, right? There
Mm.
are professional carers, and they have um, uh, certainly a chosen field that, maybe has a hero mentality. Surgeons are living on the edge of life and death every single day. And I know that there's been some pretty profound healthcare providers in your life, and I wondered if maybe you wanted to share that journey, and also your relationship with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and some of the exciting things you have coming up there. I think would be really interesting to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I have Crohn's disease, and that's something that I have lived with, since my childhood. I wasn't actually diagnosed properly until I was like in my late teen years. Um, but I went through a lot of challenges, ups and downs and turns. I've now had three bowel resections, which is a lot. But certainly without my medical team and without all the medical professionals and my surgeons and without all my doctors and all that, I wouldn't have been able to get through that. And on the emotional side, it's like, how do they wrestle with having to speak to a person on a human level and actually connect and understand who they are as a person, versus the next day them lying on their table and cutting them open, and like, I mean, because it's one thing to be like, okay, they're a human being, and like you connect with them on an emotional level, and you're talking about, how do we best help you on that emotional level. But then at the same time, you have to, in some sort of way, disconnect as well, because like if you bring all of that emotion and you bring all of that relationship into me lying on the table in front of you, when you have to get in there with your hands, and you have to surgically cut, and you have to be like really methodical and really logical and really rational. Like, you have to be able to really disconnect the two. And so, like, I really feel for them, and I really have a heart for all these people that do these things,
Mhm.
that take life and death into their hands. And I will be next week, actually, which you will be attending. I will be honored at the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's 50th annual gala for the Courage Award, which I am so eternally and deeply grateful to be realized for that and recognized for that. But I know, and it'll be in my speech as well, but like, I recognize that it's not just me and it's not just my story. There's so many people around the world and this nation that struggle with it just as much as me, and if not more so. I'm very fortunate that because of my incredible, amazing medical team and professionals that I've had throughout my journey of Crohn's disease, that they really utilize the best strategies and the best treatments on both the physical and the emotional side to bring me back to to being whole. I did at one point, which is where my incredible surgeon saved my life, not just once but twice, where she was able to put me back together. But in that strategy, it meant that I had an ostomy bag for 6 months. And honestly, that it was incredible, like how that did save my life, but at the same time, on the emotional and mental level, it was soul crushing. And that was actually one of the times in my life where I did question, how am I going to go on with my life? Is my life over? Am I still going to be seen the same? Because it was a time in my life where I felt like I couldn't do much. I couldn't do anything. And there are a lot of people today that live with these ostomy bags, permanently, because they had no choice. Without it, they couldn't live a normal life. And I think that's also just challenging the narrative and the norms on like what a normal life looks like, whether you have an ostomy bag or whether or not you have some other surgical procedure that makes your body look different or function differently. That doesn't disqualify you from being valuable, being an innate of innate value and worth, um, just because your body operates differently or functions in a different way to people that, again, quote unquote normal. So.